Hi, I'm Crystal. Today I made some friendship Valentine cards, or Galentines, using some friendship sentiments on the front and on the inside of the card, and a tie-dye pattern for my background. And that tie-dye pattern, I started out with some unsuccessful backgrounds that I made during my shaving cream experiment. Turns out glossy paper works better, but I've got the mixed media paper and the watercolor paper from that experiment, and it really reminded me a little bit of the kind of the pattern you end up when you're tie-dyeing. So I've got this tie-dye stamp, spiral die from Stampin' Up. And if you're unfamiliar with that shaving cream technique, I used it in my Lunar New Year card, but it's an old technique, so I think a lot of you have probably seen it before. But these shaving cream backgrounds I thought were perfect, so I took my spiral die stamp and I inked it with two colors. If you're going to do that, you always want to use the lighter color first, and that's so you avoid picking up the darker color with your light ink pad. So I've inked a little bit of yellow in the middle, and then I'm going to use, I believe it was Melon Mambo around the outside of the stamp. And then I'm going to stamp that down onto the mixed media paper. Now, mixed media paper is a little bit rough. It doesn't take stamping as well as smooth paper does. Watercolor paper has the same problem. So I'm going to mist the stamp lightly with water. That's going to facilitate the ink transfer. And I think it really is appropriate for the theme of the stamp. You don't get a really crisp image when you're tie-dyeing, and so I think that this is appropriate for several reasons. But after I mist and I press down on the paper, I end up with an image that I think is just perfectly evocative of a tie-dyed shirt. So I set that aside to dry, and then I used the Heartfelt stamp set to stamp my little decorations for the front of the card. So some hearts and that friendship sentiment. And I'm using the same yellow and pink colors. So of course there's not much contrast between the background and the decorations, so I cut a little border out of craft paper, and then inside the craft paper border I cut a heart border die, which I thought was appropriate for these Valentine's cards. This paper is banana leaf paper, so it's very rough. So I'm using a little bit of double-sided tape on the back to hold it in place. That will work even with this really rough banana leaf paper. Then I'm going to put the sentiments on that border, but of course cutting out the border left me with a bunch of little heart shapes left over, so I'm going to go ahead and adhere some of those on the inside of the card. I think that's perfect, and the brown color goes perfectly with that message about candy. I think Valentine's Day is all about the candy. More chocolate the better. Thank you for joining me today.